Hey there, I'm Tori Soar, and welcome back to Ranking TMNT Characters. Today we will be covering the dynamic mutant duo, Bebop and Rocksteady. Although this pair has only been adapted into a handful of TMNT iterations, they are a very iconic staple of this franchise. But with that, let's get into the ranking. In last place are Bebop and Rocksteady from Mutant Mayhem. This film does a solid job of showcasing how Bebop and Rocksteady always have each other's backs, and those violent, angry tendencies that we see in a lot of their other versions. Unfortunately, due to how many mutants are featured in this movie, we don't get a lot of insight into Bebop and Rocksteady individually, and thus we don't get to know them as well as all of the other versions of them. While the other Mutanimals also appeared in Tales of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and got some other character focus there, Bebop and Rocksteady did not have that luxury. On top of this, I do miss them starting off as human gang members that get turned into these powerful mutant criminals. In Mutant Mayhem, they just sort of blend into the rest of the mutant ensemble and don't stand out in the same way that other versions of BNR do. I'm also not a fan of how short of a time they were antagonists in this movie. We only really see them as obstacles to the turtles in the car chase sequence, whereas all other instances that they interact with the turtles, they're super chummy. I don't necessarily mind Bebop and Rocksteady being redeemed as long as we've had substantial time with them being those bombastic criminals we know and love. They still have time to potentially become antagonists in this universe again, especially with the introduction of the Shredder, but as it stands right now, they haven't fulfilled that role as much as I would have liked. In general, I think Mutant Mayhem, Bebop, and Rocksteady are fine adaptations of the characters, but they are by far their weakest interpretations. In third place are the original Bebop and Rocksteady from the 1987 animated series. These two are incredibly iconic and hilarious characters in this show. Their primary role is obviously as Shredder and Krang's main henchmen and a consistent obstacle for the turtles to fight. The reason these two will never be my favorite version of the duo is because they never actually pose a genuine threat to the turtles and only really fulfill the role of added comedy and padding out episodes. That said, in the context of the 1987 universe, they don't really need to be a genuine threat to be really fun and compelling characters in this show. There are a lot of fun little gags and interactions between the two of them, and especially with Shredder and Krang. I've talked before about how much I love the Technodrome gang's dynamic resembling a dysfunctional family, with Shredder and Krang being the exhausted parents to their rambunctious kids, Bebop and Rocksteady.
Wait until Krang hears what you've done. Krang, get up here. You two have got a lot of explaining to do.
You made Krang and I made Shredder. Let's knock them down.
That's for making us clean our rooms all the time.
It is such a fun dynamic to see play out in this series and is my favorite character dynamic in this whole franchise. For the most part, I don't have a preference between Bebop and Rocksteady, but I think I like Bebop slightly more because he slays Old Lady Drag on multiple occasions, and there's a really cute episode where he adopts a giant ice monster, which is a lot of fun.
My little Frosty is so talented.
Although I do prefer when Bebop and Rocksteady are an actual threat to the turtles, 1987 BNR are so much fun and very fitting for that universe. In second place, I have Bebop and Rocksteady from the 2012 animated series. Out of all versions of these characters, 2012 Bopsteady are by far the most unique interpretation. For the most part, for all other versions of Bebop and Rocksteady, the duo is pretty identical in terms of their personalities and physicality. However, 2012 Bebop and Rocksteady are completely different in terms of body shape, size, fighting style, and personality. A criticism I've seen a lot of people levy at 2012 Bebop is they don't like how he's skinny as opposed to being this big, imposing form that all other versions of BNR have. Although I do somewhat agree that I wish Bebop was a bit bigger and stronger, for the most part I don't mind the change and I think it aligns with him working with technology more. I think it's a really fun change for Bebop to start as this tech-savvy criminal instead of having that same bombastic and destructive personality he always has. As much as I love that typical characterization, switching up the formula a bit is a lot of fun, and I think they maintained the general essence of Bebop fairly well, with his overconfidence being his downfall a lot of the time.
Oh man, how'd you find me?
Cause you don't shut up!
Rocksteady is a bit more in line with his typical characterization, except now he's from the USSR. for some reason, but I think my favorite part of 2012 Bebop and Rocksteady is specifically their dynamic with one another. They start off as tentative allies that eventually find themselves subservient to the Shredder, and as time goes on, especially after their mutation, they become an inseparable duo. This is the only version of Bebop and Rocksteady in which their mutation is specifically the catalyst for them becoming so close and becoming friends, whereas all other versions they were sort of inseparable already and their mutation just sort of emphasized that more. Their mutation being that catalyst for them being so close is a really fun and unique approach. On top of that, they're literally in love. Unfortunately, the TMNT franchise as a whole doesn't have a lot of canon queer representation, but there are a few examples like Bebop and Rocksteady where it is very much implied. Every time I talk about this, I always get a bunch of comments of people saying, they're just friends, or it's just a joke. But then let me ask you, what is the joke? That they're acting kind of gay? Maybe it's cause they're kinda gay. Regardless of whether or not you interpret 2012 Bebop and Rocksteady's relationship as romantic, it is undeniable that they have a super close bond that makes them really fun characters in this series. In first place are Bebop and Rocksteady from Out of the Shadows. This movie introduced a lot of recurring Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles characters to this continuity, but by far the best characters they introduced are Bebop and Rocksteady, who are arguably the best characters in this version in general. They took the basic formula of Bebop and Rocksteady being idiotic henchmen that serve the Shredder and transformed them into an actual threat. As I mentioned earlier, I adore 1987 Bebop and Rocksteady, but they're never a genuine obstacle and only really serve as added comedy to the show. However, Out of the Shadows took the foundation of these bumbling morons that don't think things through and turned them into absolute powerhouses that pose a genuine threat to the Turtles and their mission. They also retain a lot of that physical comedy, but in a way that adapts to the tone of the Bayverse films, leaning a bit less cartoony and more into the fun ridiculousness that these types of action movies have. This comedy also extends to their dialogue and chemistry that they have with each other and the other characters. On top of this, you get a really great sense of them being best friends, just two absolute mad lads having the time of their lives wreaking havoc together.
My man.
Out of the Shadows Bebop and Rocksteady are undeniably the best on-screen adaptations of these characters. They do a great job of mixing the lighthearted foundation of the characters with the fun action of the film. Like with Karai, my favorite version of Bebop and Rocksteady doesn't come from any of the on-screen adaptations and are instead from the IDW comic continuity. These two feel almost exactly like Bayverse Bebop and Rocksteady, but 10 times funnier and 10 times more violent. While their live-action counterparts are definitely more of a physical threat than the previous iterations, IDW Bopsteady are so extremely violent that they're kind of terrifying at times. Let's not forget that Rocksteady is responsible for Donatello's shell being completely shattered and him almost dying. These comics also do a great job of incorporating the energy of 1987 BNR being major screw-ups. However, because IDW BNR are such physical menaces, their screw-ups always make a hilariously colossal mess of things. It's such a comedy of errors in which every action they take to counteract their mistakes just end up making everything worse, and yet it always ends up working out for them in the end. We see this in Bebop and Rocksteady Destroy Everything and Bebop and Rocksteady Hit the Road, which are both incredibly hilarious arcs that are an absolute blast to read, featuring the Bopsteadyverse and a dinosaur with a gun. What more could you ask for? If you don't read any of the rest of the IDW continuity but are a fan of Bebop and Rocksteady, I would absolutely recommend checking these issues out because they are easily some of my favorites. They are so much fun. Overall, I cannot get enough of IDW Bebop and Rocksteady. They mix violence and comedy together so well, and they are such an ideal version of these characters. They are probably the only Ninja Turtles characters that I genuinely believe cannot get any better. They are perfect to me. As far as my personal iteration of TMNT goes, I do not currently have plans for Bebop and Rocksteady in TMNT Genesis. If I did end up incorporating them, they would likely be members of the Purple Dragons that are taken in as test subjects for the super soldier mutagen that TCRI is working on for the Foot, and their personalities would be akin to Bayverse and IDW Bopsteady. Beyond that, I don't have any concrete plans for them yet. Bebop and Rocksteady are such fun characters with such a great relationship. Whether it's romantic, platonic, or familial, these two are soulmates that will stick together through whatever bullshit they get themselves into. But that does it for this character ranking. Let me know if you agree with my placements and which versions of Bebop and Rocksteady are your personal favorite. The next character ranking will be covering versions of Leonardo, so make sure to subscribe so you are notified when that video comes out. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a like if you did. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see y'all next time.